right, let's get into it. Today we are going to talk about books read, planners used, and all of the behind the scenes of YouTube in September. It's a monthly wrap up. We're gonna hang out, have a good time, and I'm trying to film this whole thing in less than an hour before I need to start work. I will have a menu down below if you're interested in the planners over the book talk or the YouTube stuff over anything else. You can jump around, it's all good. And let's start with the books that I read in September. Going with the easiest / quickest to talk through, I ended up continuing the Adventure Zone series. This is book 3, Petals to the Metal. I'm still enjoying the series. I still love the podcast, which is what this is based off of, a actual play Dungeons and Dragons game between the McElroy brothers and their dad. And if you want to check it out, I highly recommend. It's the first campaign they did, the Balance arc, and I think I recommend listening to the podcast before picking up the graphic novel, even though this is absolutely fantastic. I do think that having had the podcast experience does make me enjoy this a lot more, so that's my recommendation. Then, in a similar vein, I ended up reading books 2 through 7 of the Veronica Speedwell series. I was just eating them up, one after the other. I will say the first book in the series was the only 5 stars that I've given. The rest have been high 4 stars with 1 high 3 stars. But overall, it's been a really fun time. I'm really enjoying it. I can't wait until I get a hands on the 8th book and the 9th book comes out, because I believe that one is in pre-order for next year, which is such a long time to wait. And I know it's silly for me to say, since I only just got introduced to it and I was able to read 6 books back to back. But yeah, I friggin' love it. If you're into a Victorian era mystery with a slow burn romance tied to it, with like character development and just, you know, a strong independent woman character, it's a lot of fun. There are some tropey things. Our character is not like other women, even though she also is, and she relates that. So there is kind of the girl power, but also the realization that society doesn't give women chances, and different conversations, and I don't know. It's just a lot of fun. I loved it. I enjoy it. I recommend it. It's definitely a cozy sort of series, even though there are murder and mayhem. The first book in the series, they're on the run from somebody out to get her, and yeah, so it's not like it's cozy in the sense that nothing happens, but there is just that calm, cozy vibe because of how the characters are, and I personally like their dynamic, so it was a lot of fun. So yeah, I ended up reading a lot of that in September. Then, because I was in the romance mood, actually technically I think I read this first before I finished all of those, but I ended up picking up Anyone But You by Jennifer Cruzy. This was one of my tabletop TBR picks. I wanted something that had a dog, not realizing that these would all fit for that, but you know, it is what it is. I haven't read this in a really long time, and I was wondering if it would still be a favorite romance for me, considering it has the age gap trope where our main character has recently turned 40. She has left her, you know, rich husband to start a new life. They have just been divorced. She's got her own apartment. She gets this really sad dog, and it ends up bringing the neighbor into her life, and he is a just turning 30-year-old ER doctor who ends up finding an interest in her, and complications ensue. It's cute. I wouldn't necessarily say this is the best book ever, but it was still a favorite after reading it. I don't know how much of that was just nostalgia. I've definitely read this a couple of times over the years. I am a fan of Jennifer Cruzy's writing. It is very cheesy and fun and possibly even tropey in terms of the way that it is, but it's just always been a feel-good type of writing for me. So I definitely ended up enjoying it, and because both of the characters are still adults, you know, someone just turning 30, someone just turning 40, I didn't mind the age gap, even though it was constantly brought up because that is the conflict between them. I don't know. I still just enjoyed it. It was a good time. Next up, we we've got a classic. I ended up reading Emma by Jane Austen, and I'm gonna be honest with you, when I first started reading this, I wasn't sure what to expect, then ended up seeing some parallels to the movie Clueless, realizing that Clueless is based off of this book, and got really, really into it for a little bit, and then things kind of slowed down, and I was really, really, really bored. I was just waiting for things to happen, for us to get further on, for it to get exciting, and even in the end where things started to get interesting again, it kind of like rushed through the good stuff, and it wasn't as enjoyable to me. I didn't like it. I didn't. I like the concept. I like the movies that I've seen based off of it. The book itself, for me, though, was kind of a slog. Now, that being said, I wonder how a second read would feel. So I do imagine in the far, far future, I might pick this up again and give it another shot. I feel like classics, I don't know, like there's more to it the next time you read it. Also, I will admit the middle part that I didn't enjoy as much. I was just listening to the audiobook. I stopped, you know, highlighting and tabbing and engaging with it as much as I was in the beginning because things just kind of stopped happening. So I didn't really want to be that invested, but I don't know how I feel. I'm feeling kind of sad that I didn't enjoy it more is kind of where we're at. Whew. Not that many books left now. Next up, I ended up reading Mortal Follies by Alexis Hall. Loved it. Loved it, loved it, loved it. 5-star. I think this is the, well, okay, I guess if you count Jennifer Cruzy, but I don't know if that's like a solid 5-star the same way this was for me. And it's funny too, because there are some issues that I have with this book. This was about a woman who randomly ends up getting cursed or something, like questionable things are happening to her, and she ends up meeting another woman in the middle of one of these episodes, and she ends up saving the day, and then she's trying to figure out what's going on, and they end up kind of building a relationship as they're trying to figure out why these terrible things are happening to her. Set in like a Regency era. It also has fantasy elements, and we're hearing the story be told by a nymph slash fairy creature who is basically following her through this whole process and documenting this story. It's so cute. I love the silly, ridiculous narrator voice. Just all of the different elements. There was a sapphic relationship in here because she ends up catching feels for this woman who kind of has helped her through some of this process. And I don't know, I just really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. I did have some issues between the romance aspect. I can see that the narrator might be annoying to some people. I'm interested, if you've read this, I would love to hear your thoughts on the narrator. I mostly loved it. I found it so charming and silly and fun, but I could see that was an issue. And the issues that I actually had were there were a couple of moments with the relationship between the two of them. It did feel a little bit more, I don't know, toxic than romantic, and like it was just borderline that way. And so I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. Like, that's not giving me the vibes that I want. But those instances weren't that large, and overall I still really enjoyed it. So, all right, then we get to The Blood Trials and The Blood Gift. So I ended up reading The Fourth Wing. I couldn't help but see there being a lot of similarities between the two books, and in some ways this book did things better, while in other ways the other book did things better. In both instances, you have a girl who needs to go through some trials at a school to get into this military situation, but the school trials are horribly deadly. In Fourth Wing, they needed as many people as they could get, so it was kind of ridiculous that they were killing people off. And this one, these particular students slash warriors end up getting these special enhancements that ends up making fewer of them more powerful. And so their whole thing is they need to weed out the weaklings so that they're just fighting with the best of the best so that they could be the most efficient. So it does feel a little bit more understandable. There is also a questionable love interest in both stories, and in the first one, The Fourth Wing, that I read first, not that it came out first, but in The Fourth Wing, she is just being forced to go to this school because her mother works there and is all like, I can't have a scribe child, I need a warrior child. So even though you've never trained for this, you're forced to be this. And she just just is the chosen one sort of thing. There's also amazing dragon rep in that book that I loved. That is not in this one at all. In this case, we have a character who has been training her entire life to do these trials, but her grandfather dies and she's all like, well, maybe I should do something else, until it's like, actually, we think your grandfather was murdered. And because of that, you should probably go in there and try and figure out who did it. Like, we think he was killed on the inside and it's all hush hush. And she's like, okay, I'm gonna avenge my father, figure out what's going on, and go into the school and, you know, all of that. Grandfather, not her father, her grandfather. Now, that was well done. Our main character grated my nerves sometimes, but for the most part, I enjoyed it. The romance aspect, not my favorite. It wasn't very strong. It wasn't a big element of it. There were some issues that I had with mostly her, which was true in the other book, if I'm being honest with you, but because it wasn't as big of a part of the story, I don't know, I just noticed it more. But in general, the whole premise of this book, the actual trials themselves, what she went through, it was hard, it was harrowing, it was done really, really well. I was super, super invested, and a lot of the problems with the world is discrimination against people that look like her. Her father had gained a lot of power, even though he was somebody that not a lot of people respected because of his background, and she kind of follows into that scenario. And then there's other elements that come to play that we learn about that becomes this whole big thing. I ended up really enjoying it. At the beginning, I feel like I was hesitant, things were going on, I had some up and downs, but like I was here for it. So I was super excited to pick up The Blood Gift, the sequel of the duology, this is it, and it took me forever to get into this book. Like, I just was not interested in the, you know, bigger picture that we were seeing and where they were going and what was happening, and I just struggled until I did. This book sucked for me for the beginning. Not because there was anything wrong with the story or the writing, although she pissed me off. She was so annoying to me in so many instances of this book. More so this book than in this one. And so it was just really hard. And then we got to certain areas, certain things started happening, and I started getting more interested. We were introduced to some other characters, some twists and turns, some, you know, this, that, and the other. And I ended up loving it in the end. I think I ended up giving this like a 4 stars in the end, knocking a star for some of the annoyances that I had. This one, I don't know. Like, I disliked so much of the beginning that it feels weird to also give it a 4 stars, but it also feels wrong to give it a 3 stars with how much I enjoyed the end. I don't know. But yeah, that was an interesting experience. This also is probably the main reason why I didn't read a lot throughout the month. I mean, like, I know this is technically a lot, but for me, is because I ended up getting into a slump trying to finish The Blood Gift. Like, I just didn't read for like 2 weeks. Most of my reading was done in the very beginning and at the very end. Technically, there is one more book after doing the tabletop TBR. I still had several days left of September, so I started one of the first books for the month, which was The Supernaturals by David L. Goldman. And this is a haunted house story, supernatural situation with a house that is famous for scary, spooky things happening. The last time something happened was an incident with a teacher 7 years prior where questionable things happened and somebody didn't make it out. And so 7 years later, when a TV show wants to bring it back up, they're like, we're gonna bring him back into the mix and see, you know, if we can redeem ourselves with this crazy Halloween special. But as they're going through things, let's just say stuff happens, it ends up being more intense. Now, I'm gonna say right off the bat, I was loving this. I was eating it up. I was totally into it. I think with supernatural stories, I like repetitiveness in a way that not everybody does, but it kind of just hit home certain things. I was really, really enjoying it. But unfortunately, this book is filled with sexism, racism, and transphobia in a way that I'm not here for. Like, I'm just not here for it. I ended up getting past some of the sexism and racism because it was like micro issues, right? Stuff that we experience in the day-to-day in general. I noticed that I do that in books where I'm just all like, okay, this sucks, but like, it's also normal, so I don't think too much about it. But there ended up being some bigger problematic transphobia issues, so I ended up not liking it, right? Also, in addition to those issues, when we actually get to like the ending of the book, the answers to things were kind of rushed. It didn't fully make sense. It wasn't satisfying, and none of the problematic things were addressed. So I'm pretty sure that the person here is like an ignorant transphobe who has some racist tendency, because I think the N-word, I noticed it once where it was cut off, like it was started to be said and then it was cut off, and I don't know if that was the audiobook where they're like, we're not actually gonna say it, or if it was cut off in the book itself, but I hear it was said at least twice from other people's reviews. And then like I ended up noticing that. Then also the only minority characters were referred to as their race instead of their names often. Apparently the writing was really bad. Again, I listened to the audiobook, so I didn't notice that as much. And then there were some pretty obvious like sexism situations where you had the female characters just represented in kind of tropey, crappy ways, and then also they were referred to in very sexualized ways, which wasn't very enjoyable. But again, I kind of pushed that to the side at first because it's a horror book and because some of the characters were in at least kind of stronger positions, so they weren't all super weak, even though they were deemed kind of like bitchy, which, you know, is another bad trope that we end up getting. So in the end, I ended up kind of hating it. Like like this is like a 2-star, which sucked because like the first half I was really here for, and this just seems to be something that happens to me when I end up reading horror by men, which is such a letdown. Like it's such a letdown. But those are all of the books that I ended up reading. So now we're gonna get into just planner life, because it has been just a hot mess. I have all of my planners that I've been using. I'm trying to figure out what I'm gonna be doing for 2024, so I'm bringing things back into my system, trying different other things. I've got so much going on right now. I also, because I'm doing everything with the YouTube channels, which we're going to talk about as well, I'm also trying to be a little bit more organized and give things their space. I'll go through the easy stuff first. I have restarted doing my A Line a Day 5-year journal, and it's been going fine. I actually fill it out at night before I go to sleep instead of trying to bulk fill a whole bunch. I've got all of these empty pages because I was trying to just like batch fill them and then I wouldn't do it, and so it just got like bigger and bigger and bigger. So I am gonna have to go back and try and backfill some of these pages at some point, but at least for now, right before I go to bed, I fill out a little section of what happened through the day, which has been working out fine. I also have been sticking with my plant log, which is great because I also ended up bringing my plants into my library again. This has just been going strong for the most part. I did miss in like June and July. I wasn't as good as keeping up with it, but that was it. You know, I got back to keeping up with it and it hasn't been a problem. Okay, then we have my GM book. I am trying to transfer all of my notes from this journal into my plotter planner because I wanted it to be a lot easier for me to move things around and just keep ideas and then also keep the notes for my game. But I have been procrastinating, so I haven't been doing it. So that's kind of annoying, but that is something that I'm hoping to work on sooner rather than later. I also decided recently, which I do have a video that talks about this, that I wanted to really start filling out my commonplace notebook. I put this on hold because I started filling out notes for the book Cast by Isabel Wilkerson, which I was rereading and trying to get notes from, and then I just haven't continued reading it, so I stopped filling this up, and instead I was accumulating a bunch of commonplace notes in my life tracker, my main journal, which we'll talk about a little bit as well, and I wasn't transferring any of those over into the commonplace book, which is silly because the whole point of this is so that I can collect all of the things that I want to be able to look back at, and I just haven't been doing. So I did start transferring over the notes from this and putting them in here, and because I wanted to start using this more for journaling instead of trying to do commonplacing and, you know, heavier planning stuff. I also created a fleeting notes commonplace inbox, mostly for like ideas and content that I get from, you know, videos, podcasts, and stuff like that. I did also plan on using this for books, but I'm currently reading When the Reckoning Comes. I'm not that far into it, but I am loving it so far. And I've been using my project cards to take notes of book stuff. So no book quotes go into this inbox. They go onto these cards, and then theoretically I'll move them into the commonplace book sometime in the future. And that's a little bit stressful for me because I love having the annotations in the actual book and having these book note cards to go with them, but it's just so many steps to get them into this book. Which is purposeful because I want to make sure that I don't put everything in this book. Like, that's the reason why I have all of these layers, is so that this book itself will have the best of the best, whereas my other commonplace collecting tools have just everything. You know, whatever I get here and there ends up in these books so that future me can see whether or not they're worth it. And so that has been a little bit of a struggle for me, if I'm being honest with you. So going back to my planner, I love this. This is my life planner. It tracks kind of everything, more for memory keeping than anything else. I realized that with the way I set up my daily pages, that if I try to use them for super functional planning, I just don't feel like there's enough space here for me to do everything that I want. So when I was trying to use this as a commonplace inbox, there are some days where I consume so much stuff and this just isn't enough space, especially if I also want to keep track of what's happening through the day, if I want to also give ideas or content or videos that I want to do. Like, this just isn't enough stuff. So I did a couple of things. First, I ended up getting a work planner so that I could separate my work stuff, because I was never putting extensive work notes in here and I just needed a place for that. And so I ended up getting a Hobonichi Weeks. I liked it so much that when I realized that I wanted to give myself more space to work on videos, I ended up getting one to dedicate towards content, and I'm loving that for the most part, except that I don't know how to use the weeks in here. Like, it's just wasted. I don't know how to use it. I want to use it for other things, but I want this to be a dedicated content book. I don't know, struggling. And so because next year, instead of getting another Hobonichi Weeks for content, I'm just going to get a week-sized journal similar to this, where it's just pages, you know, they're not planner pages or anything. It's just blank gridded pages. I'm gonna do that and have a little separate calendar that I use. And so since I'm gonna be doing that, part of me was all like, oh, but I like the idea of a weeks in general. And so I took out my TN, which is my traveler's notebook, and I have been trying to test out a weeklies here that I use for everything, which seems a little bit silly because I am struggling with using the weeks in here, which is why I want to use the weeks here, but I don't want the weeks here to be blank, so I would rather figure out a way to make these work than to use another. I don't know. It's a mess. It's a mess. And then, because I'm just overwhelmed with all of these things and I'm trying to figure stuff out and I don't want to rush into it and make it so that I don't like something and I stop using it, I have picked out my old commonplace diary and I'm just using it as a diary. Originally, this was my commonplace inbox, but I wasn't using it because it was too big, which is why I ended up creating this instead, which I prefer to take around with me. And so I started using this again just for diarying. So I'm thinking I'm gonna take off the coding for this and just turn this into a regular diary. That's been working out really nice. I'm starting to do morning pages because mental health, you got to keep yourself going, and I have too much in my brain, which is why I deal with all of this to begin with. The planner struggle is real, like so real. I'm not even kidding. But yeah, so this has been working, but I don't know what I would do if I was to like travel. And for some reason I keep thinking that, even though I don't really travel a lot, especially since I like work from home, I don't have to worry about bringing something to and from the office, and I have a dedicated workbook anyway. You know, like, I don't know why that's on my brain, but I'm not happy with this as the sole source of getting things out. And so so yeah, it's become more of just a straight up journal to brain dump and to, you know, like word vomit. But then I wanted a place to do my like daily notes and pages so I could have more memory keeping, ideas, general, like this is what's going on in life in here, and then brain dump word vomit in here as separate things. But then I actually need a place for the planning side, which is why I was trying to do this, which I don't think really works for me, because for the same reason that this wasn't working, having dedicated limited space, just it eats my brain. I just go like, oh, I only have one page for the week. I'm probably gonna need more than one page on some weeks. So like, what do? We're almost done with the planner side of things, but I ended up picking up this idea book. It's kind of thin. It's got really small grid paper with a line on the side to kind of mimic the Hobonichi Weeks paper, but the sizing's a lot different. But I've been using this just to put, you know, daily notes. So I had a meeting for my little brother. We went to his teacher to, you know, ask questions about certain things. And then this was today, some tasks that I'm hoping to do at some point, and some notes that I ended up taking when I was doing a study session with my brother. And so I'm using this as kind of just daily pages because I like the idea of daily pages and I don't know where to put them. Like, part of me wants to have another Hobonichi Weeks just for personal stuff, and then I would transfer everything into here, but then I don't know how I'm going to be using my weeklies for memory keeping. Like, I don't know. I keep trying to make these functional planning and I'm struggling. I'm on the struggle bus. That's a majority of everything. I did also update my inbox code. So I have different colors, and then I started using these little stamps so that I can do categories and then topics, because I really enjoy the way that my common planner has been looking and how I use it. Like, it's just a great tool to collect things that I want to remember, learn, reference again. Like, it's just a really good tool on its own. Part of me almost wishes though that I was also using it for collecting book notes, but at the same time, I prefer annotating in the actual book and using these project cards for additional book notes. Like, I think I'm just gonna keep these as they are since they work for me. But yeah, the struggle is still real. And then lastly, I've been picking up my physical sketchbook. I was doodling daily on my iPad and sharing that with my patrons, but I wanted to do something physical, and so I brought out my old sketchbook. It looks friggin' awful, and I just do messy sketching in here. I'm doing a October world building challenge, which is a great segue into the last little thing that I have. I ended up using this A6 Hobonichi planner insert thing so that I can keep track of my Worldtober challenge, which is just a world building challenge that I created for October, where I do some drawings for ideas and then write out information about that specific idea. So it's basically 1.5 pages a day, and there's enough space for the entire month, plus, you know, a cover page and a review at the very end. And so that's what I've been doing for the month, since I am trying to finish out 100 days of daily drawing, and then I'm planning on doing another weekly art challenge thing that I'll share with the patrons, since I've been sharing these daily drawings with them every week, which has been working out really nice. But yeah, it's been a lot. It's been a lot. And I will say, in terms of like YouTube, I am feeling a little bit overwhelmed already with the new channel, still wanting to do content over here and just trying to get my bearings. I'm trying once again to be smarter about how I do my content over there, and it's stressful because the best way to go about making videos is to think about how you would promote them first. So like, think about your hook, the coolest thing about the video, the thumbnail, title, think about all of that before you end up filming, and just have a general idea of what you're going to do first, and then you do the filming. You plan things out. Ideally, you script it out so you have a full idea of how everything's going, and then you just modify it based off of how things actually end up. And that's one of the best ways to go about it. Make sure that the intro is super snappy and that you keep a bunch of interest throughout. And I'm just not good at that. Like, I just want to hang out with guys, talk about things that I like, and not craft it in a way to keep retention up and stuff like that. You know, like, I just want want to sit here, talk about books and life, and on the other channel, the cool tabletop role-playing game stuff that I've collected and am interested in. And trying to be smarter about how I go about things is just, it's stressing me out. It's making it so that I'm not making anything. And that's a problem. Like, it's not worth it if you're not making anything. So September went well. I ended up getting ahead on everything. I was making content. I was testing things out. I was doing really good. I decided to make more videos than I originally planned so that I could, you know, get a lot of traction going, get a lot of views. I'm hoping to, you know, hit those goals on that channel and get it monetized in the first year. I guess it technically wouldn't be the first year, but like, you know what I mean. I'm just trying to do all of these things on that channel, and yeah, I'm already feeling burnt out. And the funny thing is, it's not because I'm doing so much, because I stopped like 2-3 weeks ago. I stopped filming and editing because I'm trying to be smarter, and I'm like, okay, it's not quantity over quality. Let's try and focus on quality over quantity now that I've, you know, reestablished myself, and I just have no faith. Like here, I'm trying to be relaxed and trying to just like hang, chill, talk about stuff real, give you a behind the scenes. But over there, I'm trying to be like super strategic, and it's a bit much. Like, it's a bit much. So I actually don't have that much more time before I have to go to work. So we're gonna wrap this up. I will say one other side note, which you're probably not gonna see anything about it for a while, but I have been really missing vlogging. But I need to figure out my whole situation about making content for the GM Witch channel, since that's the big focus at the moment, is me trying to see if I can, you know, get that up and going, get that steady, get it easy for me to make content over there, and, you know, just get into good habits and stuff like that before I start reintroducing a bunch of stuff here, especially vlogging, which was really stressful for me, because I do know that when I start vlogging again, I want to figure out different ways to make it work better for me. So like planning things out a little bit better and tracking the videos that I take so that when I'm editing, it's not super stressful, or just getting into habit of editing a little bit every day. Like, I need to try different things when I start vlogging again, because I love vlogging, but it's become such a stress-inducing situation. Like, I ended up filming, I have so many vlogs filmed that were just too stressful for me to edit that I just never did. So that's how life has been recently. I hope you found this interesting or entertaining. If there's anything else you would like me to talk about in future monthly wrap-up, let me know. I want to do this moving forward. Otherwise, I'll catch you in the next one. Until then, bye!